Good day. We are now on the last part of the three monotheistic religions. We are now in Islam. So again, the same most essential learning competencies as Judaism and Christianity. We need to examine the brief history, practices, and related issues of the monotheistic Abrahamic religions. In this case, Islam. To compare and contrast the uniqueness and similarities of the monotheistic Abrahamic religions. So in this case, Islam. So the comparative analysis part, the second part ay nagawa nyo na yan, or the second most essential learning competency ay nagawa nyo na yan during your creative output making. So I hope napagtagpi-tagbi din nyo, nabigyan nyo ng magandang comparative analysis, and of course, naintindihan at naunawaan na ninyo ang similarities and differences, and at some point, common denominator between the three monotheistic Abrahamic religions. So yan. We are now again entering the holy ground, the holy space, as we examine the third of the monotheistic religion. Sabi nga ni John Paul II, the Jews were the older brothers of Christianity. Islam will be Muslims will be the youngest brothers, because they are the very, in a way, recent, no, bunso among the three. Okay, so we begin. We begin with the history of Islam. Islam, which began in 610 AD, was revealed by God to Muhammad. And this religion is built on principles and values in which the believer becomes accountable for his or her action. So there's accountability, there's responsibility for every action. Not just action, but also thoughts and being. Why? Because for them, actions, thoughts, and being will always have something to do with their faith, with their profession of faith. Later in the credo, we will find out. But in this case, it is somewhat related or closer to the shalom of Judaism. When a believer becomes accountable for his or her actions, thoughts, and being, it is always with respect to his or her relationship with Allah. That's the primary content of their credo, of what they profess. No? With respect to his or her relationship with Allah, with other people, of course, fellow Muslims, and with the environment. So Muhammad began to preach publicly around 613 AD. Kaya lang he was first ridiculed by the Quraysh in Mecca. So everything began in Mecca. But there he was not accepted easily, particularly by this tribe called Quraysh. He was ridiculed. He was persecuted. Why? Because he is teaching against the polytheism of Mecca during that time. The polytheism of the Quraysh. And of course, their idolatry. So Muhammad he spoke against the polytheism and the idolatry of the Quraysh in Mecca. And they did not accepted the teaching of a one God that was preached by Muhammad. But around 630 AD, Muhammad received traders from Yathrib, Medina. And these traders were inspired by the teachings of Muhammad, and they decided to convert to Islam. They then invited Muhammad to lead their community in Medina, and the Prophet accepted. So he accepted the offer. So when Muhammad arrived in Medina to strengthen the community that he is now leading, he began to construct a mosque. So the first mosque was constructed in Medina. In the same year, 630 AD, Muhammad and his followers conquered Mecca, finally, and defeated the Quraysh. Muhammad rededicated the Kaaba, later you'll know what the Kaaba is, to Allah, and destroyed the idols. So he restored back the monotheism of the people in Mecca. Later you'll know why. And he destroyed the idols. Now the Prophet Muhammad died peacefully in the house of his favorite wife Aisha in 632 AD. This death of Muhammad, may mong problem. Ikaw ng problem ang death ni Muhammad. So after the death of Muhammad, Islam experienced a schism, a division, a separation over who should be the Prophet's Khalifa or Caliphate. successor, the one who will replace Muhammad. So after his death, nagkaroon na ng mga factions. A group of leaders from both Mecca and Medina quickly held an election, and the role of the Caliph or Caliph was given to Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr was the best friend of Muhammad and at the same time his father-in-law, the father of his wife Aisha. Some disagreed, no? Kasi feeling nung iba, it should be from the bloodline of Muhammad or the same blood as Muhammad. Some felt that the Prophet's cousin, Ali ibn Ali Talib, who was also married to his daughter Fatima, was the rightful Khalifa. Kaya lang, because of the election during that time, hindi siguro sila nakapag-first move. So, Abu Bakr became the second caliph or the second leader of Islam. Kaya lang, no, after the death of the third caliph, so Muhammad, Abu Bakr, then the third caliph, Uthman ibn Affan, of the powerful Umayyad clan. After the death of that third caliph, Ali, the cousin and son-in-law of Muhammad, finally was chosen as caliph. Kaya lang, powerful ang Umayyad clan. They were disappointed that not one of them was chosen. So they refused to recognize Ali as the Prophet's fourth caliph, and they established their own caliphate. This disagreement over the right of Ali as caliph escalated until Islam broke into two main sects, the Sunni and the Shia. The Sunni and the Shia. So what are the major differences between these two sects of Islam? Sinabi nating Sunni, they are the majority of Muslims. About 85% of all Muslims belong to this group. The leaders should be chosen through ijma or consensus, meaning they elect their leaders. They elect their caliph. No? The leaders elect the caliph. And then, ang mga Shiites naman, they compose of the minority. About 15% of all Muslims belong to this group. And their leader should be a descendant of Muhammad, meaning from the blood of Muhammad. Descendant of Muhammad. They are the minority. Now, another difference between the two will be their interpretation of the Sharia or the Islamic law. For the Sunni, the Sharia was codified and closed by the 10th century, meaning it cannot be reinterpreted. While for the Shiites, qualified religious leaders, in this case, successors or from the blood of Muhammad, the descendants of Muhammad, have the authority to interpret the Sharia or the Islamic law. So that's the difference between the two. But recently lang makakita ka na ng mga ano, although they are different, they still cry one voice. They are one Muslim. They are one Islam. Okay, the difference will be the acceptance of leaders. So that is the major divisions of Islam. Now, trivia time, the last before we proceed with our main theme, the three C's, Credo, Cultus, and Code. Kaaba. Kaaba or Kaaba is considered as the holiest shrine in Islam. Ito yung dedicate ni Muhammad when he conquered Mecca. Earlier na sinabi ko. The Kaaba is considered as the first house of worship dedicated to the one God, built by Abraham and Ishmael. So we all know the Jews, Christianities, and Muslims share the same ancestry as Abraham, but the roots are different. For example, the Israelites or the Jews and the Christians will trace their roots back to Abraham's promised son Isaac, while the line of the Muslims will be from the firstborn of Abraham from Hagar, who is Ishmael. So this Abraham and Ishmael built an altar, no, a house of worship for God. No? And according to Islamic tradition, nagkaroon ng problem dito kasi after the death of Ishmael, remember Ishmael was exiled or thrown away by Sarah, no, together with his mother. After the death of Ishmael, the people began to practice polytheism and idolatry. So for thousands of years, the people in Mecca or the descendants of Ishmael became idolaters and polytheists. And they enshrined their idols doon sa Kaaba na ginawa ni Abraham at ni Ishmael as a house of worship sana for the one God, Allah. So Muhammad later destroyed these idols in the Kaaba when he conquered Mecca in 630 AD. And at present, it becomes the most important pilgrimage site of Islam, Mecca. And then Muslims pray facing the direction of the Kaaba. So if you will search that, the Muslims face the west, something different from the Jews and the early Christians, because when the Jews and the early Christians worship, they face the east. For the Jews, they face the east because it is where the Jerusalem temple was located. For the Christians, it is because the sun rises in the east, the Son of God, the sun. All right, analogy or metaphor. That's the first trivia. And the last trivia will be about the Wahi. The Wahi or revelation, ito yung how did Muhammad receive the message from Allah? And that is the Wahi, the revelation made by the angel Gabriel, or in Arabic, Jibril, to Muhammad. And this revelation, according to them, lasted until the death of the Prophet. So Muslims believe that Gabriel explained to Muhammad his threefold function. Number one, that he is the messenger of Allah. Number two, that he is the angel of scriptures. And number three, that he is tasked to confirm and preach the oneness of Allah and his teachings to the people as his last prophet. As his last prophet. So that's the Wahi. The contents of the Wahi, yung threefold task ni Muhammad. Ulitin ko lang, number one, that he is the messenger of Allah, prophet of Allah. Number two, the angel of scriptures. And number three, he is tasked to confirm and preach the oneness of Allah and his teachings to the people as his last prophet. All right, so that's the second trivia. Now we move to lesson proper. We are now in the credo part. The credo. So we all know that the credo, ibig sabihin niyan, what they believe. What they believe. The credo. And then in this case, pag-isahin ko si credo and cultus because it's somewhat different to distinguish between the two in Islam. All right. So we start with this Surah Al-Fatiha. And for us to make sense of what was written here, this is the prologue of Quran, by the way. Allow me to reshare my screen and let us listen and watch this singing of or chanting of the Surah Al-Fatiha.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
So that's the Surat Al-Fatiha, the prologue of Islam. So yun yung content niya, and this is the Arabic version of the Surat Al-Fatiha. So I heard you heard the chanting of the Al-Fatiha. So you have that feel of how Muslims pray. It is the prologue of the Quran. Now, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, all praise to only Allah, the Lord of the worlds, the Beneficent, the Merciful, Master of the Day of Judgment. Thee alone do we worship, and to Thee only do we seek help. Guide us, O Lord, on the straight path, the path of those upon whom Thou hast bestowed Thy bounties, not the path of those who have evoked Thy wrath, nor of those who have gone astray. Beautiful prayer. So my question is, what is the Muslim view of God on God based on the Al-Fatiha? I want you to reflect. What is the Muslim view on God based on the Al-Fatiha? And number two, what does the worshipper hope for? What does the worshipper hope for regarding his or her relationship with Allah? What does the worshipper hope for in terms of his relationship with Allah? So that's the two questions that I would like you to ponder as we progress into sa lesson natin. Ano. So let's balikan muna natin ano ang Islam before we proceed to the five pillars. It has something to do with the credo and the cultus. Number one, Islam is an Arabic word which means submission. When you submit something, you give up something. You sacrifice something of your own so that you can give something. Submission. The term, or you surrender something. The term Islam denotes submitting one's will to God and what He wills. Surrendering your own will so that Allah's will may be followed or may be obeyed. Kaya nga, this term also, no, that obedience has something to do also with another meaning of this word Islam. Because Islam is also rooted to the word or in the word peace. In Hebrew, it's shalom, ano, but the Arabic translation, the Arabic version of that will be salam. Kaya nga when Muslims greet each other, they will always say salam alaykum. Thus, Islam denotes peace, serenity, being at peace, spreading and ensuring peace for others, and of course, accepting Allah's commandments. Because when you submit to the will of Allah, it is safe to assume that you are accepting Allah's commands peacefully, obediently, without reservation. So this is achieved. How can they achieve this? It is achieved through learning and applying Allah's commands in the Quran and following the teachings of Muhammad. Learning and applying Allah's commands in the Quran and the teachings, following the teachings of Muhammad the Prophet. So a Muslim ang tawag sa kanila, a Muslim is the one who practices Islam, the one who surrenders his or her will to God, which means that he or she obeys God. No, kaya nga sa kanila, even Jesus Christ, one of their prophets, no, Jesus Christ, is also a Muslim because Jesus Christ practiced Islam. Jesus Christ surrendered his own will to God. Now, the essence of Islam, we will now go to the deeper sense of the credo. The essence of Islam is the belief in one God, Allah. And the Quran states that Allah is the one and only God, and that no deity exists apart from Him or aside Him. That He is one, eternal. The following word, this is the reaction of Islam to Christianity, ano? Begets not nor begotten. Because in Christianity, the Father begets the Son is begotten of the Father, no? And none is comparable to Him. Muslims also profess belief in angels, kaya nga sa angel Jibril. They also believe in the presence of evil angels, mga jinn, and of course the prophets. In fact, Jesus Christ is recognized as a prophet in Islam. And one of the books, one of the surahs of or chapter of Quran is titled Miriam. There we can find the story of Mary. Miriam is Arabic or Hebrew for Mary. And then the story of Jesus Christ, one of the revered prophets in the Quran. Okay? Now, Muslims claim that Allah is the same deity worshipped in Judaism and Christianity. There's no distinction. While Jews and Christians trace their Abrahamic root to Isaac, the son of the promise, as I mentioned earlier, Muslims trace their roots to Ishmael, the firstborn of Abraham, to the slave of Sarah, Hagar. Muslims believe that the teachings of Muhammad complete the teachings given by the Creator Allah and complements the Abrahamic teachings of Judaism and Christianity. Complementary. That's for them their belief. No. Now, let's go deeper to what they believe and what they profess. We go to the five pillars of Islam. These five pillars refer to the five duties that every Muslim must perform action. These acts are integrated into the lives of Muslims and take precedence over worldly matters. So for them, by performing these duties, Muslims live out their Islamic faith and bring themselves closer to salvation. They bring themselves closer to salvation. So let us begin. The first pillar, Ash Shahada. as shahada, the witnessing or the declaration of faith. This testimony of faith is the foundation, take note of the word, foundation of all other beliefs and practices in Islam. And it is therefore considered the most important pillar of Islam. Most important pillar, foundation, most important pillar of Islam. This is evident in their practice of whispering the Shahada to a newborn Muslim baby and to a dying person. To a dying person. This statement of faith is given with a genuine belief and incorporates the primary beliefs of Islam. One becomes a Muslim by professing this faith. La ilaha illa illa Muhammadur Rasulu illa. La ilaha illa illa Muhammadur Rasulu illa. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. That's the two. Credo. Everything else comes after this. La ilaha illa illa Muhammadur Rasulu illa. There is no God but God. Muhammad is his prophet. So this is the first pillar, Ash Shahada. The second pillar will be Salah. Salah meaning prayer. Prayer in the Islamic faith is direct link between the believer and God. And Muslims must pray 5 times a day. At dawn, midday, late afternoon, sunset, and nightfall. So trivia lang, early Christians also pray more than 5 times a day, by the way. And it was still practiced today by the monks. Meron kami tinatawag na morning prayer or lauds before 6 a.m., midday prayer, meron pang noon prayer, mid-afternoon prayer, evening prayer, night prayer, and sometimes may matins pa, mga evening or yung mga midnight prayer, hourly prayer, meron din yan. So, hindi yan pinapractice na because it is not required to all Christians. But for Muslims, this 5 times a day prayer is required to all who practices Islam, Muslims. Alright? And ano sinasabi nila tungkol sa Salah? According to a hadith is their sacred oral tradition. Salah performed with other Muslims, meaning communal prayer, is 25 times more effective than praying alone. 25 times more effective than praying alone. Furthermore, adult Muslim males are required to gather in a mosque to perform the midday salah, 12 noon, every Yawm al-Jum'ah, meaning the day of assembly. For the Jews, the day of assembly is a Saturday. For Christians, the day of assembly is a Sunday. For Muslims, the day of assembly, Friday. It is taken from Quran, Surah 62, 9 to 11. Now, in this Yawm al-Jum'ah every Friday, they are led in prayer by an imam. An imam is not a priest. He is not a pastor, but a leader, a prayer leader or a pattern maker. So the main feature of Friday noon salah is a sermon or exposition by the imam of a particular theme or verse in the Quran. And mostly business establishments close for the day at Friday noon. I experienced this myself when we had our interfaith dialogue with Islam in the Blue Mosque in Quiapo. So we went there on a Friday. So it's tama-tama tanghaling tapat. It was there Yawm al-Jum'ah or Day of Assembly. And when we went there, the imam is already teaching the contents of the Quran. It's just like giving or delivering homily. He is exposing a particular theme or verse. And what we heard during that day is an exposition about Islam being a religion of peace. That's the theme. That's the content of the sermon. So that's the second pillar. The third pillar will be the Sawm or fasting, abstaining or fasting. And this practice involves fasting and self-control during the holy month of Ramadan. So Ramadan, now we are in the month of Ramadan, and it is another method of self-purification. Muslims are required to abstain from food, drink, and sensual pleasures from dawn to dusk. And then they can only drink after sunset at night. So that is a method of purification. Sa mga Christians naman, yung fasting will be, hindi alam ng iba, but we are required to fast every Friday, be it Lent or not. We are required to abstain from eating meat every Friday, be it Lent or not. Akala kasi ng ibang Christians, it was only during the Lenten season, but no, it's every Friday. Hindi yan ganun kahigpit. No? So that's the third. The fourth will be the zakat or the zakah, meaning that which purifies, almsgiving. No? The word zakat means purification and growth. Sabi ng Islam kasi, no, all things belong to God. And tayo ay mga ano lang, entrusted lang nung kayamanan na binigay sa atin ng Allah. So charitable giving for them purifies wealth by setting aside a portion for those in need. So Muslims donate 2.5% of any amount they have saved for a complete lunar year. So meron kang na-save na 1 million pesos for a lunar year. 2.5% of that 1 million will go to zakat, will go to charity. And a Muslim can go beyond that required 2.5%. A Muslim may also donate more as an act of sadaqah meaning voluntary charity, in order to achieve additional rewards from Allah. Now, the fifth pillar will be the Hajj or the pilgrimage. The Hajj or pilgrimage to Mecca, which must be performed by Muslims once in their lifetime. And ano siya, no, required siya. Kaya lang only those who are physically and financially able are obligated to perform this Hajj. Because for them, this Hajj creates unity and fraternity between members of the Islamic community. Imagine every year, tons of people go to Mecca to pray together in front of the Kaaba. All right? Eh, yung mga hindi nakaka-afford, let's say for example, no, doon mag-a-apply yung sadaka eh. Those who cannot afford to make a pilgrimage of Mecca because they are not that well off, other people will donate to them. Other people will sponsor them so they can also have their pilgrimage to Mecca. So these five pillars, the performance of these five pillars fall under the overarching principle of jihad. It falls under the overarching principle of jihad. Jihad, to struggle, to strive, to exert effort. Others only know jihad as the war, the holy war. But according to the Islamic scholar we talked to during our interreligious dialogue with Islam in the Blue Mosque, sabi niya, we all experiences jihad every day. We're always in that constant struggle between our own will and the will of Allah, our selfish desire and the will of Allah. It's always in conflict. And who are we listening to? Kasi sometimes our own will can be very tempting rather than the will of Allah. So for them, we are in this constant war within us. We are in constant war within ourselves. And for them, these five pillars will help us choose, will help a Muslim choose the better part, will help the Muslims choose the better option, the will of Allah, rather than their own selfish desires. At yun yung nakalagay doon sa limang pillars. No? It is making them walk again in the straight path, in the proper path towards their salvation. Okay? So yeah. That was the cultus and the credo of Islam. Now we move to the code of Islam. Belief and faith in one God is a central tenet in Islamic ethics. They define faith as the thoughts and actions of the believer, and it is through action and speech that a Muslim is able to express his faith and live a virtuous life. Kaya nga, napakataas ng level of ano nila dyan, accountability when it comes to thoughts and actions. Why? Because as a Muslim, their thoughts and their actions are shaped by the faith that they have. Remember the ashahada. That's the content. It should change their thoughts and actions so that through their action and speech, they can express their faith and live a virtuous life. And to help them that, sabi ng Quran, Surah 17:26-38, there is an Islamic Decalogue. Number 1, the same thing with Judaism and Christianity. Do not worship another God except Allah. Number 2, be kind to your parents and care for them. Number 3, give your relatives what is their due. Very important ang relatives and family in all Abrahamic religions. The question will be why. because the Abrahamic monotheistic religions are all Asian religions. And we all know the kind of family ties Asians have. Number four, do not be tight-fisted nor extravagant with your possessions, meaning do not be greedy and do not be over gastos naman, ano, to the point of extravagance. Number five, do not abandon your children out of fear of poverty. Nowadays, we want to abandon children out of our fear of poverty. Do not fornicate. Number six. Number seven, do not kill anyone whom God has forbidden except for a just cause. Number eight, do not steal from others or from orphans and deal with others honestly and justly. Number nine, do not follow what you do not know. This is their take of reason. Do not follow what you do not know. And number 10, do not act with arrogance. Now, the primary source of these ethical teachings for Muslims will be the Quran. Just like in Judaism, the primary source will be the Torah. For Christianity, the primary source will be the Bible, particularly the Gospel. And for Muslims, it's the Quran. The secondary source for the Quran will be the Sunnah, the shining example of the Prophet Muhammad, meaning the living commentary of the Quran. And nakalagay dyan yung ano, no, words and deeds na nakalagay sa ahadith or oral traditions. For Judaism, the secondary source will be the Talmud. For Christianity, the Catechism will be the secondary source. For Islam, it is the Sunnah. However, Islamic ethics is most explicitly expressed in Islamic law, the Sharia. The Sharia or the pathway. The pathway. And the Sharia, we have siyang two sections. The Al-Ibadat concerns one service to Allah, and Al-Muamalat deals with the relationship with others. Just like how Judaism divided the Ten Commandments into two, love God, number two, love others. Love your neighbor. Ang kagaya din ng greatest commandments to Jesus. So that is their code. Balikan lang natin ulit, kasi I mentioned about the very source of their Islamic ethics. We mentioned the Quran, their scriptures. So there are these 10 facts about the Quran. Basahin natin. Number one, the Holy Quran has 114 surah or chapters. And the Holy Quran has 30 parts. Number two, the revelation started in the holy month of Ramadan, meaning Gabriel revealed everything to Muhammad during the holy month of Ramadan. Maybe that's the reason why the Ramadan is very important for Muslims. Number three, Quran was revealed for over 23 years, 13 years in Mecca and 10 years in Medina. Number four, whoever reads one letter of the Quran gets 10 rewards. So how many letter can you read in the Quran so you can get plenty of rewards? Number five, the longest chapter, the longest surah was the Baqarah. And it is concerned with the agricultural future contracts. The shortest surah will be the Kawthar. At ang laman lang na iyan, we have given thee abundance, so pray to the Lord. So pray to your Lord and sacrifice to him alone. Indeed, your enemy is the one cut off. This is the shortest surah. The Quran was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, praise be upon him, that's BBUH, through the angel Jibril or Gabriel. The Prophet was 40 years old when the first verse of the Quran was revealed to him. And the literal meaning of Quran is that which is being read, ang binabasa. There are 25 prophets mentioned in the Holy Quran. One of them will be Moses and another will be Jesus. They form one of the 25 prophets mentioned. And the Quran, according to them, will intercede for people who recited it on Judgment Day. Meaning the Quran itself will tell Allah that this person recited me frequently. So the Holy Quran will intercede for the person. Meron ding parang rosary beads ang mga Islam and they call it the misbaha or masbaha. Tasbih or sibha. And it contains 99 beads. Yung malaki, no? 99 normal sized beads, yung mahaba. And it corresponds to the 99 names of Allah. Meron yung mini version, 33 beads. Kaya pag dinasal nila, pag nag-meditate sila niyan, 3 times yung cycle, no? To complete the 99 names of Allah. So this is some sort of the trivia that it's good to know. Kasi baka makakita kayo ng Islam na nagme-meditate, nagdadasal na hawak-hawak yung prayer beads, yung masbaha. At least you know, hindi sila nag-rosary. No, it's a different thing. They are uttering the 99 names of Allah, and they are meditating on them. So this ends Islam. So I hope meron tayong nakuha in this monotheistic religions. And I hope na complement nitong mga basic information that I have given you yung ginawa ninyong creative output for the third quarter. Alright? So thank you. Nakompleto na natin ang monotheistic religions. For the fourth quarter, we will begin studying and understanding religions of Indian origin. That will be the first, Buddhism and Hinduism. And then the Chinese origin. So that will be later. And I hope I could stretch up until the importance of the interreligious dialogue and ecumenism, because that is the call for today. All right. So thank you for listening. Have a great day.